I'm holding court, instead in trial. Why ain't I see you around back when I was down?
I mean, these are the kind of cases that I prosecuted. They've all affected me so much and in different ways. And I tell people, when I do a case, it's not just about, okay, here's the evidence, here's the law. I'm not just going through the motions. I really get into it. And I really try to understand who my victim was and how my victim lived. I prosecuted the Nipsey Hussle case, Eric Holder Jr. for killing Nipsey Hussle. I didn't know much about Nipsey before that happened. I got on YouTube. I watched endless hours of Nipsey Hussle interviews. And one of the great things about Nipsey, if people don't know, he's a very thoughtful person.
Absolutely.
And I think a very honest person. And that's what kept me coming back to watch more, because I could tell if he's willing to talk about something, he's going to tell the truth about it. And if he's not willing to talk about it, he just wouldn't talk about it. I learned so much about him, and I prosecuted gang cases for 6 years, but I learned more about that gang life from the perspective of somebody who lived in it and in many ways transcended it.
Right.
Were you surprised to see the work that he was doing and had been doing up until the point?
I was, because like I said, I had heard of Nipsey Hussle. You know, I live in LA.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how consequential he was, especially to people here in LA. It wasn't until I started to see the day he was killed. In fact, I got a phone call that day telling me that I was going to be handling the case. So when news reports started coming out and tweets from like LeBron James, all these folks that I respected, and I was like, well, man, who was Nipsey Hussle?
Right.
I know he's a rapper, but I didn't realize, you know, all that he was doing and all I think he would have continued to do, which is really, really a shame. I tell people, if Nipsey had lived 20 years from now, his music career would just be a footnote, I think, in what he ultimately would have accomplished. He was really a brilliant, entrepreneurial-minded person, something we need in our community so much. And it's just a tragedy that he was taken away.
Yeah. So based on the fact that you have such intimate knowledge with that case, if you can share, did you guys ever get to the bottom of why that transpired? Because I mean, you see the news reports and you hear, you know, you hear the narrative and the innuendo and all of that, but from your perspective of being so close to it, why did that happen?
I think it had a lot to do with just the nature of the relationship between Nipsey Hussle and Eric Holder Jr. Now, I know there's a lot of talk and speculation that there was something else going on.
Right.
We never saw that. I think this was a situation of two young men who grew up together in the same neighborhood. One was excelling at his craft and the other one wasn't. In fact, the other one wasn't even welcome in the neighborhood anymore. And there was a certain jealousy and envy involved before their paths crossed that day. And when their paths crossed that day, one of them took offense to something that was relatively innocuous that the other person said. And it just led to a killing that wouldn't have happened if probably 500 other things had happened so they weren't there together at the same time in the same place.
Eric Holder, I know he tried to play the mentally challenged role. Is that something he really struggled with?
Well, he does have a history of some mental illness.
Okay.
I don't believe it played any role in what happened that day. I mean, there are people who have mental challenges and they're able to function pretty well.
And they don't kill people.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so in that case, you know, his lawyer didn't even really play that up. The defense in that case was, yes, my client killed Nipsey Hussle, but he was provoked. So the claim was Nipsey's conversation with him provoked him to the point where, you know, it was maybe not excusable to kill him, but that it should diminish a murder to manslaughter.
Okay, I see.
And the jury didn't buy it.
Right. And that's where Cowboy, is that his name?
Yeah.
Yeah, he came and he refuted that, correct?
Right. Herman Douglas.
Herman Douglas.
AKA Cowboy. Yeah, Cowboy was there for most of the transaction that occurred that day. He went inside to eat his lunch. At the time of the shooting, he wasn't actually present, but he heard a lot of conversation before. And, you know, the conversation, we never got like one complete accurate description of what was said, but it was something of the nature of Nipsey telling Eric Holder that there was word on the street that he had snitched on somebody, there was some paperwork to that effect, and that he needed to clear it up. So everybody who knows the streets, who's listening to us right now, knows exactly what we're talking about. And Eric took offense to that. Now, if you're already jealous of somebody, if you're already envious, if you're trying to get someone like Nipsey to hear your demo, your SoundCloud material, and he's not interested, and then he tells you, hey, you're not even supposed to be around here. I'm not quoting him, but you know what I mean. That's not enough to send an ordinary person into, you know, a homicidal rage. But it was enough for Eric.
That was something he probably had in his heart anyway, and that was the perfect little thing. Well, we know he was carrying 2 guns that day, so he was looking for trouble anyway. And so when that happened, you know, you mix that with guns, and so often that's what we see play out on the streets. So people can dismiss the whole conspiracies of other people being involved in orchestrating and all of that stuff. You've never seen any of that. And I don't want to call any names of the conspiracies, but I'm sure you've heard the names.
I've heard it all. I've heard people that you would go, what? That's crazy. We get emails. When we get these high-profile cases, we get a lot of emails from people with their own theory about what happened, and we got to kind of look into it, right? You can't just dismiss just dismiss this stuff, even if it's kind of foolish on its face. But I can tell you that the investigation didn't reveal any reason to think anybody else was involved in this whatsoever.
And so, last thing about the Nipsey case. So the judge sentenced Eric Holder to 60 years. Was he being funny with that?
No, he wasn't. He wasn't.
Because when I saw it, I was like, oh, judge got jokes. Okay.
Now, the judge did have some sentencing options. That would have landed him on a different number. But he chose an option and explained why that made sense. And it just happened to be 60 years. So people know judges can't just pull a number out of the air. Every crime has a certain number of years attached to it. And depending on how the judge sentences, whatever that number is what it is. In this case, it happened to be 60.
That's divine.
I
just think it's divine sentencing.
The irony of that.
I mean, really.
I'm home court, standing trial. Why ain't I see you?